We're going to begin looking now at numbers raised to the 0th power. Your objective today, I will demonstrate my mathematical ability to know that a number raised to a 0 power is equal to 1. And we're going to do this through class discussion. Okay, before we get started, we need to review some things though first. Okay, the first one, if I have two numbers, two powers, I'm multiplying them as long as I have the same base. Remember, all I have to do is just simply add their exponents. Okay. Now, remember what we talked about yesterday. If I have a power raised to another power, which is what we have in example number 2, I have to multiply the exponents. So therefore, that is different. All right. Now, if I have two numbers, okay, raised to an exponent, and if it's outside the parentheses like we have it, that simply means that with the distributive property, I'm going to distribute that n to the x and the n to the y. Alright, so now we have three different properties we're talking about. Now let's look at division a little bit. If I have two powers and I divide them, okay, as long as I have the same base, I can subtract them. And for right now, m has to be greater than n in order to do this. It's not always going to be the case, but for right now, this is what we're talking about. Okay, same thing as kind of before as the multiplication one. With if I have a number raised to a power, okay, it goes to both the numerator and the denominator. That there again goes back to the distributive property. I have to distribute it to every term that is inside that parentheses. So you need to make sure you have these 5 rules down for exponents, and now we're going to look where we're going to go from there. So I have a question. What does 3 to the 0th power equal? Well, let's say, for example, I think it's going to be 3 times 0, which is 0. So I think it's going to be 0. Let's see if that works. If I have 3 to the mth power times 3 to the 0th power, okay, I know, well actually let's put another variable in here. And actually, let's say this is to the 3rd. Okay? Well, the very first rule we talked about is if the bases are the same, which they are, all I have to do is simply add the exponents. So that means I should have 3 to the 3rd power, because 3 plus 0 is 3. Let's see if that holds out. Okay? If I have, now, 3 times 0 is 0, right? Well, and then anytime, so if I think that's 0, 3 to the 0th power, if you say that's 0, that means it's 3 to the 3rd times 0, and anything times 0 is 0. Well, does that equal? It doesn't, because remember 3 to the 3rd is actually 27. And 27 does not equal 0. So, this is not it. Okay? Let's try another way. Alright? So let's say that 3 to the 0th power is simply 3. Well, let's use the same deal. I think that 3 to the 0th power equals 3. Let's see if that works this time. Well, 3 to the 3rd times 3 to the 0th. Alright? If I have 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, because we're saying that 3 to the 0th power could be 3. Well, I know that's 9 times 3 times 3. You know this is 27 times 3. 27 times 3 is 81. Well, does that really equal this? It does not. Okay? So that won't work. Okay? This is not right. So if it doesn't equal 0 and it doesn't equal 3, well then what does it equal? Let's look at the next slide. So here's the 0th power rule. For any positive number of x, so x has to be a positive number here, we can define that x to the 0th power will equal 1. So any positive number raised to the 0th power will end up equaling 1. And that is really the crux of this entire lesson today, And it continues with what we've already been talking about. That any number raised to the 0th power will simply equal 1. Alright? So make sure this part is written down in your notes, because the next slide does not really talk about the 0th power. Well, it does. But we need to make sure that this is in our notes, because this is something new, and we're going to be talking about this when you come to class. This is asking us to write the expanded form of 8,374 using exponential notation. Well, let's look at 8 first. Alright? So if I have 8, what can I multiply it by to get me to 10 to 1,000? Because I need to go 8 times 1,000 to get me 1,000. Well, I can go 10 to the 3rd. Okay? Because that is going to get me to 1,000. And then I'm going to add to that 3 times 10 to the 2nd, because 10 times 10 is 100. Therefore, 3 times 10 is, or 3 times 100 is 300. Then I'm going to add to that. I'm at 70 now, so I have 7 times 10 to the 1st. Okay. Remember, anything to the 1st power is simply that number. So 7 times 10 is 70, plus, now I got to figure out, I need 4, but I have to multiply it by a power of 10. Okay, what power of 10 am I going to use to where I have 4 times 1? Well, we learned in the last slide that anything to the 0th power is actually 1. So I can make this to the 0th power. So I have 4 times 10 to the 0th power, which would be 4 times 1. So therefore, this is my expanded form of 8,374. Alright? And this is what we're going to be doing in class. Make sure you fill out your WSQ and bring your question to class.